She almost fell straight onto the tracks, and before I could even think, my hand grabbed her arm. She froze, breathless, looking at me as if I had just pulled her out of a nightmare. Most people would have walked on. I couldn't. The subway screamed into the station, metal on metal, a bright flare of sparks licking the dark. Camila Torres kept to the polished edge of the platform out of habit, mind a few minutes ahead of her feet, slides to review, questions to anticipate, numbers to wear like armor. Her heel found a slick patch she didn't see. The tilt was sudden, indecent. Gravity hooked her forward. Gasps snapped around her. A child's voice squeaked. Then a rough, sure hand closed around her forearm and held. Easy, the man said, steady as a post. Not urgent, not panicked, steady. He anchored her, drew her back from the trembling yellow line, and didn't let go until her weight found itself again. Only then did he release her, palms open, as if showing he meant no claim. Her briefcase had burst on impact. Papers blossomed across concrete, fluttering in the train's wind like startled birds. Camila's pulse boomed in her throat. For a frightening breath, she saw the news crawl. CEO falls, timing unfortunate, investors unforgiving. Then the train thundered past, and she was still there, shoes on ground, a stranger's grip fading into memory. Word snagged. I could have. You didn't, he said, kneeling already. He swept up pages, corners aligned with quiet care. A girl crouched beside him, 7, maybe 8, black hair clipped back with a plastic barrette. She gathered 2 sheets and held them up with both hands, solemn as if returning a passport. Here, ma'am, the girl said. Something inside Camila loosened. Thank you, she managed. Her voice sounded unfamiliar, softer around the edges. She crouched too, noticing the man's jacket had a shiny elbow, the way his knuckles were scuffed like someone who works with tools. He passed her the last page and glanced toward the platform edge, almost reflexively shepherding the girl back with a light touch to the shoulder. People rush down here, he said. Gotta watch out for each other. The sentence landed heavier than its weight. Simple truth in a place built from hurry. Camila's throat tightened. You were watching, she said, surprised at the gratitude breaking through the shock. He gave a small half-smile, more acknowledgement than pride. I was close. The train exhaled and pulled away, leaving a slap of cold air that tossed a strand of her hair across her cheek. She smoothed it back and tried to assemble her authority again, blazer straight, breath measured. The familiar list marched in, board at 10, investor at noon, the demo on life support. Her phone buzzed, a bright, demanding tremor in her palm. She didn't look. Not yet. The girl was examining one of Camila's charts, nose wrinkled, lips moving as she pretended to decode the numbers. Camila found herself smiling. Thank you for helping, she said, lowering to the girl's eye level. You were brave. My name's Lucia, the girl whispered, suddenly shy. And this is my dad. The man hesitated a beat, then offered. Mateo. He tapped his chest once, casual. We're headed home. I just finished a night shift. Bus doesn't run this early, so we take the train together. Camila heard the rest anyway. It's cheaper than a cab. For her, taxis were a receipt she never signed herself. For him, they were a small extravagance tucked away for emergencies. Yet there was no resentment in his tone, just a fact shared without apology. Camila, she said, and realized how rarely she introduced herself without the title. The name felt light spoken aloud, unaccompanied by expectation. Mateo nodded as if that were sufficient, as if Camila didn't need to be anything but a person who had almost fallen and now stood again. He lifted Lucia with an easy swing and set her on his hip. She laughed, surprised at the sudden rise. The sound punctured the station's tired hum. I should. Camila gestured toward the stairs, obligation tugging at her sleeve. I have a meeting. Then go win it. Mateo said, not as a cheerleader, not as a challenge, more like a blessing offered to a stranger at a threshold. She turned, heels tapping out a crisp rhythm, and climbed a few steps into the smell of coffee and iron. Habit propelled her. Halfway up, something tugged back. She paused and looked over her shoulder. Mateo had hoisted Lucia onto his shoulders now. The child's hands patted at his hair as if arranging a crown. He tilted his head to listen while she narrated something invisible, a game, a picture only she could see. His attention sharpened around her like a circle of light. The platform's harsh fluorescence made the scene look ordinary. It was anything but. Camila felt the echo of his hand on her arm, the certainty of it, the careful release. In her world, help was transactional, billed, measured in favors to be returned. This help had been instinct, and it had arrived with no invoice attached. "Thank you," she called, voice carrying cleanly down the tiled corridor. Mateo looked up. "Take care, Camila." Her name in his mouth sounded unarmored. She nodded and continued up, gathering herself for the bright, clinical morning waiting above. Yet as she stepped into daylight, the station's cool breath still at her back, she realized her balance had returned not because she was strong, but because someone else had been. Outside, a siren flickered a block away, a bus sighed. A street vendor twisted the cap off a bottle of mustard. Ordinary city notes, all of them. Camila drew a long breath, squared her shoulders, and let the ordinary carry her forward, the image of a child on her father's shoulders stitched quietly into the lining of her resolve. Glass swallowed the city and returned it as a clean reflection across the conference room wall. Camila Torres stood with her hands briefly pressed to the cool surface, counting a slow inhale, 4 beats in, 4 beats held, 4 beats out. The station still lived in her body, the yank from gravity, the coarse steadiness of a stranger's hand, a child's laugh riding a pair of shoulders. She straightened her blazer, rolled her shoulders once, and stepped into the boardroom. Silence, there wasn't truly silence, just a cultivated hush. Leather settled. Watches flashed. Lids came off pens with neat little snaps. A row of directors and investors took their places the way soldiers take positions. Except the battle here was fought with angles of questions and details no one had time to read until the second they asked about them. "Good morning," she said, voice level. She set her briefcase down with care. Not a single paper fluttered out of place. The screen behind her bloomed to life. Market graphs, timelines, the quarter's bleeding edge. Her assistant, nameless in the room's hierarchy, dimmed the lights. Camila could feel the weight of eyes measure her posture, her unhurried breath, the steadiness of her hands. It was the same inventory they took each quarter. Is the ship's captain still one we trust to cross this ocean? She moved through the opening slides with the clarity of muscle memory. Product milestones, narrowed burn rate, customer retention curves. The figures were honest, and she let them stand without decoration. Questions ticked into the air, and she fielded them. Data, references, the work of months compressed into answers that fit between sips of water. It was going fine. Then a voice at the far end of the table slid in, precise, with a faint smile that didn't touch the eyes. "Ms. Torres, your projections look optimistic." A fingertip tapped the slide, showing the next 2 quarters. "What makes you think Hayes Technologies survives the next 90 days when our competitors already have momentum and more cash?" There it was, the familiar pivot, the prelude to doubt. Camila's usual answer sat on the tip of her tongue: benchmarks, partnerships, a line about runway that sounded like a runway. She could deliver it by rote and watch heads nod without conviction. Her gaze caught her reflection in the glass wall, a woman arranged to be impermeable. And, unbidden, the platform replayed. The grip, the careful release, a small voice saying here, "Ma'am," like offering a bridge over cold water. She let herself wait 1 heartbeat longer than custom allowed. "Survival," she began, "often gets narrated as a math problem." A few pens stopped moving. But if it were only that, we would have failed already. The past year has been a compression test. We learned the weight our systems could take, and how quickly our people adapt when conditions change without warning. A director leaned back, skeptical but listening. "Adaptation is not a metric," he said. "No," Camila agreed. "But it has a signature you can feel. You see it in the way a night engineer volunteers to sit with a client through a deployment window. You see it when a product lead admits something isn't working and brings it to the floor before the data forces the admission. We don't have the deepest pockets in this room. I won't pretend we do. What we have is a team that refuses to let precariousness become panic. Resilience isn't a slogan on a slide. It's the practice of not giving up, especially when you don't have a margin for error." The sentence surprised even her. It sounded less like a defense and more like a truth she had finally allowed to exit her sternum. A boredom-proof investor at mid-table tilted his head. "And what does that look like in the next 90 days? "It looks like doing the unglamorous work at speed," she said. We've paired features to what serves customers now, not what wins awards. We've rebuilt parts of our deployment pipeline to reduce rollbacks. It also looks like me asking for less theater and more candor from this table. If a partner is wavering, I want the call now, not the polite apology later. If you support us, I want the call now too. I will meet clarity with clarity. A murmur moved along the wood. Camila advanced another slide. Cash flow plotted plainly. No optimistic shading to hide the cliff's edge. She didn't flinch from the steepness. We've cut discretionary spending beyond what I thought was tolerable. We protected headcount where it touches the product and the customer. If we miss, she said quietly, we will miss doing the right work, not the flashy work. The room held still. She could feel the pressure in her spine asking for the familiar armor, jargon, edge, the choreography of invulnerability. Instead, she let the ordinary city she'd walked through on the way here hum at the edge of her awareness. A vendor tucking napkins into a steel holder, a bus sighing. And underneath, another hum, the memory of a father's attention turned fully toward a child in a noisy place. An older director cleared his throat. Miss Torres, we appreciate speeches about grit, but banks want numbers. I've given you the numbers, she said, without heat. You can read them as a eulogy or a plan. I'm reading them as a plan. If you stay with us, you're not betting on optimism. You're betting on a group of people who have already proven they won't freeze at the platform's edge. The metaphor slipped out before she could call it back. She let it stand. The skeptical investor's mouth twitched at one corner. Not quite a smile, not a smile. Questions resumed, but the tone had shifted, less performative sparring, more accounting. When pushback came, she answered directly. When she didn't know, she said so and named how she would find out. The meeting didn't transform into applause. This was not a movie, but the oxygen in the room adjusted enough that shoulders eased, and someone at the far end made a note to follow up, which was boardroom code for we're not walking away yet. As people rose, chairs sliding back, handshakes efficient, one investor paused by her elbow. You sounded different today, he said. It wasn't accusation. It wasn't quite praise. Camila glanced at the dark glass, caught a flash of her own reflection, poised and a fraction less armored. Maybe I am, she said. When the door clicked shut behind the last tailored jacket, she stayed a moment longer in the dim. The city beyond the glass had brightened. She thought of a text she would never send to a man whose number she did not have. I answered as myself today. She gathered her notes, the quiet steadiness from the platform stitched under her ribcage like new lining, and stepped back into the corridor where problems waited with their usual appetite. Night pressed a fine drizzle over the city, softening the neon into watery halos. Camila's sedan coughed at a light, stuttered as if reconsidering the contract between engine and road, then resigned with a final shudder. She coasted to the curb, hazard lights clicking a patient metronome. The tow service promised, as soon as possible, a phrase that meant nothing. Across the street, a small diner hummed like a reliable appliance. Chrome trim, smudged windows, a red sign that buzzed as if clearing its throat. Inside, the air held bacon salt and coffee. Laminated menus slid across tables scarred with a history of plates. The place felt sturdy in a way corporate spaces never did. She chose a corner booth, shook rain from her blazer, and told herself this was a pause, not a derailment. The waitress topped a mug without asking, a gesture so simple it startled her. She was stirring without tasting when a voice from 2 booths down sounded familiar in its plainness. Lucia, slow down. Pancakes aren't running away. Camila's head turned before she could caution herself against coincidence. Mateo sat angled toward a small girl who was submitting a pancake to an enthusiastic snowfall of sugar. The sight lifted something in Camila she hadn't realized was heavy. She hesitated. Privacy is a fragile thing. But Lucia looked up and recognized her with the open certainty of children. You're the lady from the train, Lucia announced, half whisper, half proclamation. Camila stood, and all the practiced scripts, don't intrude, keep boundaries, fell quiet. I suppose I am, she said, and moved closer. Mateo's surprise flickered, then settled into a nod that said he wasn't betting on fate, but also wouldn't argue with it. Looks like the city keeps shrinking, he said. Or the parts that matter keep repeating, Camila replied, then flushed at the earnestness of it. She rested a hand on the booth's chrome edge. May I? Please, he said, shifting to make room. The bench sighed under new weight. The waitress arrived with the unhurried competence of someone who'd seen every mood cross these seats. "Coffee?" she asked. "Thank you," Camila said, realizing she already had a mug and accepting the second anyway, grateful for the extra heat between her palms. They talked as if the conversation had begun on the platform and merely found its next paragraph. Lucia offered a running commentary about school art projects. Mateo added quiet footnotes. "She's campaigning for a mural on our living room wall." That made the child beam. Camila answered questions. "Yes, I like numbers." "No, they don't like me back every day," and asked her own, surprised at how easily they came. When the bill slid onto the table, Camila reached, habit moving faster than thought. Mateo placed 2 fingers lightly atop the check. "I've got it." She gave him the look executives reserve for negotiations they expect to win gently. "Mateo, I could buy the whole diner," he finished, smiling. "Maybe, but tonight's 3 pancakes and coffee. Let me pay for 3 pancakes and coffee." It wasn't a performance. It was a boundary that wasn't about pride so much as the right to contribute. Camila's hand withdrew. "Thank you," she said, and meant it beyond the meal. Outside, rain stitched bright lines in the street. Inside, the neon painted a mild blue along Mateo's cheekbones. He asked how her day had gone, not with the tempo people use to pry, but the steady curiosity that makes room for an honest answer. "Long," she said, and then, surprising herself, added, "but different. I spoke like myself in a room where I usually speak like my job." "How did that go?" "They listened," she said, then laughed once light. "Some of them. That's new." Mateo nodded, as if a small victory earned recognition the way a bruise earns a cold pack. He turned to Lucia. "Do you have your picture?" Lucia slid a crayon drawing from the stack beside her plate. 3 figures beneath a crooked yellow sun, hands linked. "That's me," she said, tapping the shortest. "That's Dad. And that's—" She paused, frowning at the blank over the tallest figure's head. "Camila," Camila supplied gently. Lucia grinned and wrote the letters slowly, proud of each. The paper was cheap, the colors uneven. Camila looked at it longer than she meant to. Her phone vibrated. The tow truck had arrived. She stood, reluctant to break the small shelter they'd made. "Thank you for the seat," she said. "And the coffee I didn't need." "You did," Mateo said. "Just not for caffeine." Lucia waved with both hands, sugar brightening her smile. At the door, Camila glanced back. Mateo was listening to his daughter as if nothing in the world competed with her voice. The sight carried her into the rain like a lamp you can't put in a pocket, but remember anyway. On the sidewalk, a driver in a reflective jacket lifted a hand. "Torres." "Yes," she answered, and the city's machinery began moving again. Chains, ramps, signatures. Yet the diner's warmth followed, thin and persistent as a thread. Morning light was already too bright against the glass facade of Hayes Technologies. Camila Torres stepped out of the car, clutch heavy, pulse steadying itself for another day measured in minutes and crises. Her reflection in the lobby marble showed no trace of the subway or the diner, no sign of rain-slicked neon. Only the practiced CEO mask, composed, efficient, impervious. The mask cracked within 10 steps of her office. Assistants darted like startled birds, phones clamped to ears. 2 engineers argued in low, urgent tones over a laptop balanced on a chair. A project manager met her eyes, then dropped them, guilt etched across his shoulders. Camila pushed through, shoes clicking too sharply on tile, until her CTO intercepted her at the conference room door. "Miss Torres," he was sweating. "The system crashed. We're hours from the demo. The servers won't stabilize. If this doesn't work, the investors." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The weight landed with the familiarity of an avalanche she'd been outrunning for a year. She brushed past him, entered her office, and shut the door. The glass walls meant people could still see her silhouette, but they couldn't see her hands tremble as she braced against the desk. Everything was built on this. Years of design, sleepless nights, sacrificed weekends. Hundreds of jobs depended on a system that had chosen this morning to collapse. And the woman who always had answers had none. Her reflection in the window stared back, eyes sharp and haunted. She wanted to scream, to smash something, to claw at the sterile perfection of this office until it bled truth. Instead, She forced herself into the chair and gripped the arms until her knuckles blanched. The phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, ready to fling the device into a drawer. But the number was unfamiliar. Her thumb moved before her mind caught up. Hope today's better than yesterday. Don't forget, people fall sometimes. Doesn't mean they can't get back up. The tremor in her hand stilled, just a fraction. Mateo. She pictured his calm eyes on the platform, the quiet way he guided Lucia from the edge. No performance, no agenda. Just a reminder that falling wasn't the end of motion. She pressed the phone against her forehead. A ragged laugh slipped free, equal parts relief and disbelief. In this building filled with millions of dollars, consultants, and data models, the words that steadied her came from a factory worker whose greatest asset was a refusal to look away. Her fingers typed back before strategy could intervene. "You have no idea how much I needed that right now." The reply came quickly. "Then I guess I do. Meet me after work. Same diner. My treat again." She exhaled, a slow unclenching. The world outside her office still spun in panic. Executives pacing, assistants barking into phones. But inside, she found enough stillness to stand, shoulders square again. She pushed open the door, looked at the waiting faces, and said, "We'll handle it." Her voice carried iron. No one needed to know the iron had been recast from a single text. By the time the sun bled down behind the skyline, Camila felt as though her own body had been run through the system logs, fragments, errors, warnings she couldn't resolve. The demo loomed. Investors circled, and the sensation of inevitability, failure sharpening its teeth, rode on her shoulders. Still, when she pushed open the door of the modest diner, the warmth inside cut through the static. Mateo was already there. He sat in the corner booth, posture relaxed, a coffee cooling beside him. Lucia bent over the placemat with a fistful of crayons, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. As soon as Camila slid into the seat across from them, Mateo's eyes flicked to hers, steady, searching, not in judgment, but in recognition. She realized, almost with shock, how rare it was for someone to look at her that way. "Rough day." His voice was low, even. She laughed, though it came out brittle. "The kind where I could lose everything." He didn't respond with the easy phrases she had trained herself to expect. "You'll figure it out. You always do. That's what leaders do." Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on the formica. "Then tell me, not as a CEO, as Camila, what's really going on?" Something cracked at the edges. She held his gaze a moment too long, then looked down at her hands wrapped around the mug. They were trembling. She forced herself to speak. "It's the project. The one that holds the company together. It crashed this morning, right before the demo. We've been scrambling all day, and the truth is," she stopped, throat tight. "The truth is I don't know if we'll pull it off. If we don't, Hayes collapses. Hundreds of jobs vanish. Years of work gone. And it all lands on me." Her voice snagged. She waited for him to smooth over the silence, to dismiss her words as melodrama. But Mateo only sat with her in it, let the weight rest between them until she could breathe again. "You're carrying all of it alone," he said finally. "But even the strongest hands can't hold everything without breaking. You need to let someone help." The words stung, sharp because they were true. Camila bristled instinctively. "Help, Mateo? This isn't a family dinner gone wrong. This is millions of dollars, contracts, futures. And you're human," he interrupted, calm as if stating weather. "You forget that, don't you?" Her lips parted, then closed. No one ever spoke to her like that. In boardrooms, she was treated as infallible or disposable, never human. The reminder slid into her like oxygen she hadn't known she was starved for. Before she could gather a response, Lucia piped up. "I drew us." She pushed the paper across the table. 3 figures stood beneath a lopsided yellow sun. 2 tall, 1 small, all holding hands. Camila blinked hard. She had signed billion-dollar contracts with less impact on her chest than that crayon drawing. "This is you," Lucia explained, tapping the tallest. "I had to ask how to spell your name." Camila traced the uneven letters with a fingertip, her throat aching. "It's beautiful, Lucia." "Thank you." For a long moment, the diner's hum filled the silence. Forks on plates, the hiss of the grill, neon buzzing against glass. Camila folded the drawing and slipped it into her briefcase, more carefully than she'd ever tucked away an investor contract. She looked back at Mateo. "You have no idea what this means." "Maybe I do," he said softly. And for the first time in longer than she could measure, she believed it. Morning broke with a harshness that mirrored the pressure inside Hayes Technologies. The lobby buzzed like a hive about to collapse, and Camila Torres felt it before she even cleared security. Screens glowed with error messages, engineers spoke in clipped tones, and exhaustion hung over the staff like damp air. For once, no one straightened at her arrival. Panic had leveled hierarchy. She paused outside the glass conference room, watching her team through the transparent wall. Some slouched in chairs, others stood rigidly, all of them fraying at the edges. Normally, she would stride in, deliver sharp instructions, and pull order from the chaos by sheer force of will. But Mateo's words from the diner pressed against her chest. Even the strongest hands can't hold everything without breaking. She pushed the door open, heads turned, expecting the usual storm. Instead, she set her briefcase down, took the marker from the whiteboard ledge, and wrote one word in clean block letters: together. The silence that followed was different, not dread, not relief, but confusion. Camila faced them, her hands steady on the table's edge. "We've been working like machines," she began. "But machines break down. People don't. We fix things, not by carrying them alone, but by carrying them together. No more walls. No more fear. We tackle this as one team." A ripple moved across the room. A junior developer looked up from his laptop, startled by the shift in tone. A project manager exhaled audibly. Her CTO blinked, as though unsure who was standing at the head of the table. Camila continued, voice firmer now. "This isn't about looking perfect for investors. It's about proving to ourselves that resilience is real. If we move fast, if we're honest, we can salvage the demo. But I won't pretend to have every answer. I need yours. All of yours." The invitation cracked something open. A hand went up, tentative at first. "We've been running diagnostics in isolation," one engineer admitted. "If we merge the logs, we might see the failure pattern." Another added quickly, "We can reassign part of the QA team to help. It won't be elegant, but it'll keep us from chasing the same ghost error twice." Voices overlapped. Ideas surfaced, not in the defensive tone of employees protecting themselves, but in the cadence of colleagues who suddenly believed their input mattered. Camila nodded, recording suggestions, redirecting when necessary, but never drowning them out. Hours passed in a blur of code reviews, system patches, and tense laughter at 2 in the morning when a stubborn bug finally cracked. Coffee cups littered the table, and exhaustion carved lines under every eye. But the atmosphere had shifted, from panic to momentum, from dread to fragile hope. By midnight, the servers hummed with steadier rhythm. The dashboard cleared red to orange, then, mercifully, to green. Cheers broke out, not polished applause, but raw relief, the kind that turns strangers into comrades. Someone pounded the table, someone else wiped tired eyes. Camila sat back, a swell of pride rising sharp in her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had dragged her team across a finish line alone. They had run beside her, every one of them. She thought of Lucia's drawing tucked inside her briefcase, 3 figures holding hands under a crooked sun, and realized this was its living version. Her CTO leaned close, voice hushed. "I don't know what changed in you, but thank you." Camila gave a small smile. "It wasn't just me." As she left the building in the early hours, the city air cool against her skin, she allowed herself a private acknowledgement. The strength she'd found here had been seated in a diner booth, in a child's picture, in a man's calm reminder that even leaders are human. 3 days later, Camila's heels struck a steady rhythm along the uneven sidewalk near the edge of the city. The demo had gone forward, patched together by sheer determination and collective grit. Investors weren't convinced yet, but they hadn't pulled out either. It wasn't triumph, but it was survival. And survival had started to feel like victory. She should have been on her way to another client dinner, rehearsing lines about innovation and market share. Instead, she found her steps turning down the narrow street lined with brick facades and neon signs, as if her body remembered something her mind hadn't scheduled. Her chest tightened when the diner's faded red sign came into view. Mateo was there, leaning against the brick wall outside, a simple jacket zipped against the evening chill. On his shoulders sat Lucia, clapping her hands in rhythm to a song only she could hear. The sight stopped Camila mid-step, her breath catching at the ordinariness of it. the way it radiated warmth into the cool dusk. Mateo noticed her first. His face lit, not with surprise, not with calculation, but with a genuine shift of light, like the sun cutting through cloud. He straightened, steadying Lucia with a hand as he stepped forward. "You look lighter," he said, his voice low but sure. Camila laughed softly, the sound unfamiliar in her own mouth. "Maybe I am." She hesitated, then added, "Because of you." He tilted his head, brows drawing together. "I didn't do much." "You did more than anyone else," she whispered. The truth in it startled her, but she didn't take it back. For a moment, the air between them hummed with something neither dared to name. Lucia leaned forward suddenly and cupped her small hands around her father's ear, whispering with the subtlety only children believe they possess. Mateo's ears flushed red. "Daddy," Lucia said loudly enough now, "she should come to our house." Camila pressed her lips together, trying not to laugh. Mateo rubbed the back of his neck, his embarrassment almost tender. "Lucia." But Camila's laugh slipped out, unguarded. "Well, I've had worse invitations." Mateo cleared his throat, meeting her eyes. "Dinner at my place isn't much. But the invitation's real." The CEO in her wanted to resist, wanted to weigh schedules, appearances, and the strange fragility of crossing into someone else's private world. But something deeper, the part of her that had been softened by Subway sparks and diner coffee, urged her forward. "I'd like that," she said. Lucia cheered, bouncing on Mateo's shoulders as if she had just won a prize. A small, ordinary joy filled the space, larger than any applause Camila had ever earned in a boardroom. For a moment, Camila simply stood there, letting the evening breeze brush against her hair, feeling something settle inside her. Not finality, not certainty, but the rare, delicate weight of possibility. The apartment building was modest, its brick exterior worn but tidy, flower pots lined along windowsills where neighbors had coaxed life out of small rectangles of soil. Camila followed Mateo and Lucia up the narrow stairwell, the child's laughter echoing against the chipped paint. She caught herself glancing around, an instinctive assessment of surroundings she usually reserved for clients' offices or hotel lobbies. But here the details felt personal. The scuff marks on the banister, the faint smell of detergent and tomato sauce seeping through the halls. Life in progress, unvarnished. Mateo unlocked the door with a soft grunt, nudging it open with his shoulder while Lucia darted inside ahead of them. "Shoes by the door, remember," he reminded gently, and the girl obeyed, tugging them off before skipping toward the small living room. Camila hesitated a moment before stepping over the threshold. The space was simple, compact. Worn couch draped with a faded blanket, low shelves lined with children's books and factory manuals, a handful of framed photos. Lucia in a Halloween costume, Mateo at some company picnic, both of them together under a tree in a city park. The kitchen opened directly into the room, its counters a little crowded with utensils, the stove humming with the faint scent of garlic and tomatoes. "Dinner's almost ready," Mateo said, rolling his sleeves as he stirred a pot. "Spaghetti night. Not exactly 5-star, but it does the job." Camila smiled, setting her blazer carefully over the back of a chair. 5-star isn't always what matters." The words surprised her. She realized she meant them. Lucia climbed onto a chair at the table and began arranging mismatched forks and spoons with a seriousness that made Camila's chest ache. The child looked up, bright-eyed. "You can sit next to me." Camila slid into the seat, feeling the vinyl cushion give beneath her. She noticed the uneven edges of the table, the way one leg wobbled slightly when touched. Imperfect. Real. For once, she didn't feel the urge to fix it. Mateo brought the pot to the table, serving generous scoops onto their plates. The sauce was simple, the noodles slightly uneven, but the aroma filled the small kitchen with warmth. Lucia dug in enthusiastically, red sauce smearing her cheek, and Mateo chuckled as he wiped it with a napkin. Camila found herself laughing too, the sound carrying without effort. They ate, and the conversation wound easily. Lucia's excitement about an art project at school, Mateo's offhand jokes about long shifts at the factory, Camila's halting but genuine stories about her own childhood before boardrooms consumed her life. She found herself watching Mateo as he moved, the quiet steadiness in the way he poured water, the attentiveness with which he listened to Lucia's every word. It was a strength that didn't need suits or titles to declare itself. At one point, Lucia pulled out a crayon drawing from her school folder and pressed it into Camila's hands. This one showed 3 figures around a dinner table, plates brimming, laughter sketched in bold yellow strokes above their heads. Camila traced the lines with her thumb, her vision blurring just slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's perfect." Lucia beamed and went back to her spaghetti. The evening stretched, unhurried. There was no presentation to control, no contract to secure. Only the scrape of forks, the bubbling of conversation, the fragile peace of being invited into someone else's ordinary life. As the plates emptied and the clock edged later, Camila realized she didn't want to leave. Not because she needed saving, not because she was lost, but because here, at this mismatched table in a small kitchen, she felt something she hadn't in years, alive in the company of people who asked nothing from her except her presence. She glanced at Mateo, who was wiping the counter, sleeves rolled, hair falling slightly over his brow. He caught her eyes briefly, gave a small, quiet smile. And in that smile, Camila felt the truth she had been running from. That strength wasn't only about carrying everything alone. Sometimes, strength was allowing warmth to enter and staying long enough to feel it. For the first time in her adult life, Camila Torres, the CEO who had built walls higher than skyscrapers, didn't want to return to the fortress. She wanted to remain in this small room, where laughter lived in the corners and kindness made the air lighter. And she knew, as the night settled around them, that this was not an ending. It was the first real beginning she'd had in years.